All right, Alexander, we did a video the other day on Michael Flynn and the stunning news as to how the FBI, the DOJ, the Obama White House, Robert Mueller and his staff, the mainstream media, how they targeted and framed Flynn for destruction. Of course, getting to Flynn was all about getting to Trump and destroying Trump. But now we have, literally the next day, we have more revelations coming out in the form of handwritten notes, FBI handwritten notes that reveal the FBI really did plot to trap Flynn and get him on perjury, or at
Yes.
least get him to lie or get him to resign
Yeah.
or throw him in jail.
Well,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I just want to read you one comment from Elise Stefanik, the congresswoman, and she was commenting on a Martha McCallum, Fox News Martha McCallum piece that she did, a segment that she did on her show, where she had a video of Comey from about a year ago, where I think it was Nicole Wallace from MSNBC, and she asked Comey whose idea was it to send those FBI agents to Flynn, and Comey said it with a smile. It was my idea. Let me read you what Elise Stefanik tweeted. She said, "Devastating flashback clip of Comey just aired on Martha McCallum show. When asked who went around the protocol of going through the White House counsel's office and instead decided to send the FBI agents into the White House for the Flynn perjury trap, Comey smugly responds, quote, 'I sent them.'" I mean, he sent the agents there deliberately to trap Flynn. If it was the proper procedure, he would have contacted the White House counsel. He would have told them agents are coming because something doesn't square up in our minds with Michael Flynn, and we need to question him. But they didn't do that. Alexander, get into this. I'm at a loss for words as to how disgusting and how pissed off I am with the way they treated Michael Flynn here, and how scared I am with the way they treated Michael Flynn here, because it's absolutely frightening.
Well, it's terrifying. I mean, as I said, I repeat what we've said before in our previous program. He was the national security advisor of the President of the United States. He is a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, and he is a much decorated soldier. He was also the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So, I mean, if a man like that, someone like that, can be targeted for this sort of thing, then it seems to me that everybody is at risk. I mean, he notionally, at the time when all this was happening to him, was one of the most powerful men in America. And yet he found himself subject to this kind of attack by the US intelligence community, which, remember, reports and participates in the National Security Council, which, as the president's national security advisor, he was running. I mean, it just staggers me. So when you say terrifying, terrifying describes it exactly. It's the sort of plot, by the way, that used to happen in Stalin's Russia. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you read the sort of stories of what used to go on in the 30s, and what people like Yezhov and Beria used to get up to, this is on that kind of scale. Obviously, nobody's been killed, but it's just below that. And what I found amazing, and this is the other thing that really stunned me, is that when a conspiracy of this kind happens, when people get round and plot something and do something which is against the law, and we'll come to that in a moment, because I've done some checks about this. But when people do that, they usually are very, very careful to not leave a paper trail behind them. These guys were so confident and so brazen and felt such an incredible sense of impunity as they plotted to bring down the national security advisor of the president of the United States, that they've created a paper trail. They've actually noted it all down. We now have notes, handwritten notes, written by whom one wonders. I'm sure we'll find that out, in which they say either we'll get him for for perjury, or we'll get him for something else, and we'll get him fired. I mean, it's just shocking. I mean, since when has it been the FBI's job, by the way, to get someone fired?
You want me to read you the exact quote, Alexander? So you can comment on
Please.
it?
Well, just I mean, I remember.
No, I'll read it to you exact.
But do,
I'll read it
because
to you
I think our
exact.
viewers need to, and also for our new viewers, absolutely.
Okay, let me read you exactly what those handwritten notes said, and you can comment on it in further details. Quote, if we get him to admit to breaking the Logan Act, give facts to DOJ and have them decide, end quote. That's one sentence there from the notes. Another part of the notes said, quote, or if he initially lies, then we present him, not eligible. There's a part that's not eligible. And he admits it. Document for DOJ and let them decide how to address it, end quote.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's a trap. It was a trap. It was not a real bona fide investigation. They didn't come to Flynn to try to get him to explain or clarify what had happened. By the way, and I come back to this, why was the FBI involved in this business at all? They had the transcripts. They knew what he'd said to Kislyak. They knew that he said nothing on, the Russian ambassador. They knew that he'd done absolutely nothing wrong in those conversations. Why were they even involved? What has it got to do with them? Well, we can see what it has to do with them. They were setting a trap. Now, I have been studying this because, of course, entrapment, well, I said the other day, is a criminal offense, and I thought I'd better just check to see whether in the United States it is. Well, absolutely it is. When the police agencies of the United States engage in this kind of thing, there's all kinds of what are called RICO rules. I mean, I'm not an American lawyer, but it doesn't seem that there is any doubt that this is a crime to act in this fashion. So they were conspiring to commit a crime to bring down the National Security Advisor of the United States. And you've just read you've just read it. I mean, and there are apparently lots of other notes and records and things of which we're going to be getting more and more and more. And even the Judge Sullivan, who has been, in my opinion, extremely prejudiced against Flynn, even she, I think, is now accepting that she's got to, this thing has got out of hand, and she's now making giving instructions that all this information has to be provided. This is as bad as it gets. I mean, if anybody has wanted to has had any doubts about the fact that we were dealing here with a conspiracy, well, now it's there. It's in black and white. It's handwritten. The notes are all there. There's absolutely no doubt about it. These people were altering emails from the CIA to fool to fool and deceive the FISA court, and they were plotting between them to bring down the National Security Advisor. Now, we know some people who were involved. Comey was obviously involved. He's come along and admitted it. I mean, again, how brazen and reckless that is. He goes on television and brags about the fact that he sent the FBI agents in. So we know Comey is involved.
You want me to read you while you're on Comey so you can comment on it? I'll read you further to that television, to that interview by Nicole Wallace. I'll read you further a quote that he says, because I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about this. So after he made the first comment to Nicole Wallace during that interview, he then said this, and this proves without a shadow of a doubt that Comey was one of the ringleaders to trap Flynn. And I quote, I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with a more organized investigation, a more organized administration. In the George W. Bush administration or the Obama administration, two men that all of us perhaps have increased appreciation for over the last 2 years. Here you have Comey admitting that he took advantage of the fact that the Trump White House was in its early days and was a bit disorganized and off balance, so that he could send those FBI agents, one of them being struck, so that they can trap Flynn. He admits it there. He says, I wouldn't have done this under Obama or Bush because I wouldn't be able to have caught them flat-footed. But Trump, he knew he was going to catch them flat-footed.
Well, can I point something out, of course, which is, I mean, first of all, that is again damning. That's absolutely appalling, because what he's basically admitting to there is wrongdoing. That's wrongdoing. He is admitting that in any other administration, he couldn't have done that. I mean, he wouldn't have wanted to do it, and he wouldn't have been allowed to get away with it. What kind of language is that from a policeman? From the head of the, do policemen get away with things? Those are his words. Those are his words. I mean, let's remember that. But let's go back to those early weeks of the Trump administration. Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. He's inaugurated. He's trying to sort out his administration. He can't. His own attorney general, the person he's nominated for attorney general, that's being held up for weeks by the Democrats. That was Jeff Sessions, who, of course, turned out in the end to be a forced friend. But there was no proper control of the Justice Department. The Justice Department was still being run at this time by Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, who was a holdover from the Obama period, and who we all know was deeply hostile to Trump, and I'm going to say this, was clearly one of the plotters. I don't say this out of my head. I mean, all this business of the Logan Act, she came up with. And we also know, because there was a very big article in the Washington Post on the 13th of February 2017. I read it. We've discussed it in articles on the Duran. A very big article which confirms that she and Brennan and all of the other people within the intelligence community, including Comey, were involved in all these discussions. So Sally Yates, one of the plotters, was running the Justice Department. The Attorney General of the United States, the nominated Attorney General, was not running the Justice Department. The president was under enormous siege because just weeks before, the Steele dossier had been leaked to the media. And here we see Comey taking advantage of that and bragging about it. I got away with it. The chief law enforcement officer of the United States uses those words. I got away with it.
Yeah, he flat out admits, and he's proud of it.
Absolutely.
He's proud of it.
He's proud of it. He brags about it. He brags about the fact that he committed wrongdoing and got away with it. And who else? Who else amongst the plotters? Well, McCabe, obviously. Lisa Page.
Lisa Page was also discussing with Strzok how to interview Flynn. Those are in the notes.
Exactly. And of course, Strzok himself. So here we go. I mean, all the old, all the rogues gallery that we've been talking about, same people turning up all the time. Can I just add something? This investigation of Flynn was apparently so-called investigation. This interview of Flynn was carried out under the aegis of the Russiagate investigation. Why? What connection did Flynn have with Russiagate? He wasn't named in the Steele dossier. He's not mentioned in the Steele dossier, actually, and not in any important way. His conversations with Kislyak, the FBI has complete transcripts of them because they were listening in. So why was he investigated, and why did they investigate him under that rubric, under the rubric of the Russiagate investigation? If they'd really believed this paranoid claim that he was there'd been some kind of Logan Act violation, which is nuts, by the way. I mean, it's a crazy idea. The Logan Act, just to remind our viewers, is an act from 1799, which says that private individuals cannot conduct diplomacy on behalf of the United States. I believe in its entire existence, there have been 2 abortive prosecutions and not a single conviction. And the last prosecution was in the 1850s. So it's just nonsense. I mean, that whole idea is just nonsense. Anyway, if they really had thought that, surely they ought to have been investigating, started a new investigation for a potential Logan Act violation, not conducted an investigation under the Russiagate Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And of course, the Crossfire Hurricane investigation was at that very point falling apart because the other people involved in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation were talking to all of Christopher Steele's sources, and they were coming back and saying, well, you know, the Steele dossier is all nonsense.
Jeez, what a cluster F. I'm not going to say the word, but what a cluster F.
Absolutely. But can I just say, I mean, my memory stretches back far into the past. I mean, I remember Iran-Contra. I remember Watergate. I remember all kinds of things that went on during those times. I never remember a instance of the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, the director of the FBI, bragging that he got away with something. I mean, those are words I never expected to hear from that kind of person. And I never expected to see written documents, handwritten documents, in which they actually systematically and set out in black and white a criminal plot for entrapment, one of whose purposes is to get someone fired. I mean, that again, I never expected in my life to see that. Not because I'm naive, not because I don't know that, you know, tough and bad things happen within government, but I never imagined that these people were so brazen and had such an arrogant sense of impunity that they wouldn't bother to conceal the fact of their own misconduct. Misconduct being an extremely soft word for a terrible thing.
Well, I've got 3 questions to ask you, Alexander, and I'll run them through you, and you can I will run them through you, and you can answer them. I'm at a loss for words. People can see. Anyway.
Well, doesn't happen to me very often.
This was, in the purest definition of the word, a coup d'etat.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you see it there. I mean,
correct. I mean, getting away from all the bluster and, you know, over exaggerating things that, you know, we often do as well. Everyone does. But this was a coup d'etat because getting rid of Flynn was all about getting rid of Trump.
Correct, absolutely. And of course, this is exactly the same time period when Comey's coming along and meeting Trump and telling Trump, well, you're not being investigated, even as he's clearly investigating Trump, and kept him constructing careful records, by no means necessarily true records, of things that Trump is alleged to have said. So yes, it's a coup d'etat. It's an attempt to remove the president of the United States from office. I mean, they're doing all kinds of things at this time. I'm not sure exactly the time frame now, but I seem to remember that it's about this time also that you have Rosenstein, who's the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, talking about going around with a hidden microphone to actually catch what the president says. I think it's a bit later. It's a couple of weeks later after Comey is sacked. But, you know, it's clear what the agenda is. The constitutionally elected president of the United States and members of the United States' security and intelligence services were plotting against him. If that's not a coup d'etat, what is? I can't think of any other word to describe it. Coup d'etat is the right one, and it's the one I will use.
All right. I saw an interview with Andrew McCarthy. I forgot the show. I know it was on Fox News, but I forgot the show. But the question was asked to him, the procedure that should have been followed, or you know, what should have been extended to Flynn if the FBI had any doubts or suspicions about him. And Andrew McCarthy drew an analogy, and I want you to expand on it or give your comments on it. McCarthy said, if this was any other criminal proceedings, he said, if it was a drug dealer, the FBI would have notified that drug dealer. They would have told him, we're coming in to interview you because we've got suspicions about what you've been up to. We're going to ask you questions. You have the right to have lawyers. And we're going to try to make sure that what you're telling us is true or false. And we're going to inform you about the risks that you're going to have when you answer these questions, because if you lie to us, obviously, there are going to be repercussions. What do you think of that comment by Andrew McCarthy?
Andrew McCarthy is a brilliant lawyer. He was a federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. He knows exactly what he's talking about, and he is absolutely right. And can I also add to those things? Of course, if Flynn had been advised of all of that, he might quite possibly have exercised his right to silence. He might have said to the FBI, I'm not prepared to answer these questions. My conversations with Ambassador Kislyak are classified. I did absolutely nothing wrong. I'm not prepared to answer any questions.
Good point. And finally, Alexander, Christopher Wray, he testified to Congress on multiple occasions.
Yes.
He must have known, and he must still know all these documents that are buried in the FBI that expose this scandal. Why isn't he coming forward? Why did he not come forward? Why did he not say that during testimony?
Well, it's been absolutely clear that just like Jeff Sessions, who was Donald Trump's first pick for Attorney General, turned against Trump and basically didn't help Trump. In fact, did everything he could not to help Trump. Christopher Wray has seen his job as protecting the FBI and the malpractice that happened there. He was appointed to the FBI directly after Flynn got sacked, and he has loyally followed and protected the FBI at every turn. He wouldn't release the information to the House Intelligence Committee that ended up being used in the Nunes memo. Remember that? He dragged his heels about that relentlessly and continuously. And of course, he has similarly dragged his heels about releasing all this information, which exposes the conspiracy, the criminal conspiracy that was carried on within the FBI under his predecessor.
All right, Alexander. Final comments that you may have, because to me, I know that everyone's absorbed with CV and the news about the pandemic, and this is a huge story. And if we didn't have the pandemic and the CV, I would like to think that this would be front and center, because to me, this story is about the destruction and the demolition of the United States of America. It's about the destruction of the U.S. Constitution. It's about the destruction of civil rights at its most basic level. It's about the power of the deep state, of the intelligence agencies, of the law enforcement agencies. I mean, I know everyone's focused on CV, and rightly so. It affects everyone's life in a very personal way. But I mean, I can't think of a bigger story to report on than what has happened to Flynn.
It's a huge story. I mean, can I just say, this is far worse than Watergate. I mean, we always talk about Watergate. Watergate was very bad. I mean, it was very, very bad. I mean, Nixon covered up the fact that some burglars went into the Watergate building and tape recorded some conversations that happened there. Watergate is a minor event compared to this. This is the intelligence agencies, the security agencies of the United States plotting against the country's constitutionally elected president. This affects every American citizen, because if this sort of thing is allowed to happen, if people like Comey can come along and say, well, I got away with it, which is what he's saying, if they're really able to do that, they will do it again. And the United States ceases at that point to become a democratic constitutional republic. It becomes something completely different. It becomes a national security state. I've just been watching, by the way, a extraordinarily brilliant German TV series set in Weimar, Germany. And that's all about the fact, that you have all these sinister forces working in the background, pulling strings, actually running things in Germany in the 1920s. And of course, we know how that ended. How can we be sure it won't end in the United States in exactly the same way? Every American is as affected by this as they are ultimately by the CV crisis. It may not be so obvious. You may not be, in lockdown because of it. You may not be worried about your health or even your life as a result of it. But ultimately, the CV crisis will go away unless this thing at the heart of the US government is dealt with. Then, as I said, your liberties and your constitution and your system of government, of which Americans are so rightly proud, is gone forever, and then it never will return. And can I just say personally, I mean, I speak as somebody who's not an American. The one institution that I'd always respected in the United States and had believed in and thought, did its job reasonably well was the FBI. How wrong I was.
There may be more of a connection than we think, Alexander, between the lockdown and the surveillance state and the loss of liberties caused by the CV.
There is a connection. Now, I mean, I know an awful lot of people, disagree with lockdowns, but the fact is, do you want people like this in control of lockdowns, having all that machinery, having all that investigative equipment? I mean, when you have at the heart of government, at the heart of the US government, so much corruption, so much power, combined with that corruption, becomes deadly. It's absolutely deadly. And as I said, Americans need to think very hard. And we've already had with the Snowden revelations, all the information about how mass surveillance happens. Now we've discovered what the intelligence and security agencies of the United States are prepared to do. And now, of course, we've had, with the lockdowns, if you like, the dress rehearsal for what they could do beyond that. And they've got all the tools. So America needs to think very hard about where it is at this present time. And no American should be under any illusions about how important this Flynn case is. The fact that the neoliberal, the so-called leftist and neoliberal media are not leading with these revelations in itself shows you how important they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to see MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. I want to see all the videos that they have on YouTube and all the posts that they have on Facebook and Twitter where they smear Michael Flynn and spread all the lies. I want to see them taken down. I want to see all those posts and all those videos taken down. I want to see their channels demonetized for spreading fake news, for propagating a coup d'etat against the United States president. Alexander, you were onto this. We were onto this. You were specifically onto this from December 4th, I believe 4th was the date, 2017, with your article for the Duran. We have been calling this right over and over and over again. We're the ones that are demonetized. We're the ones that are shadow banned.
I know, absolutely. This is exactly the point. And as I said, I mean, Americans need to think about these things. I mean, there is a monster loose at the heart of US government. And all those books and novels extending all the way back to the 50s and 60s about the government being out of control. Well, now it is. That dystopian world that was being talked about then, that's actually now happening.
It's arrived.
It's arrived.
All right.